This is a Masters Tale 4. In number 3, I described my first ownership of two slaves, a gay couple. It could have been a man and a woman, and that has happened in my time as a master. But in this particular case, it was the first two were two guys who were in a relationship which was slightly it was failing and fading. After all, what they both wanted, which was very, very common in what I call straight gay relationships, is the problem of leadership and passivity. There's an old argument about who wants to be Arthur and who wants to be Martha. Put it crudely, there are many Marthas, there are very few Arthurs. Our relationship, as I described, was cultural and sexual, but it also was lived in the real world. I would see one of them singly in the week at my pain studio, where we would do different things, different BDSM routines, and at weekends we would spend a couple of days together, or usually Saturday into Sunday. Tweenus is the enemy of BDSM, and possibly of all sexual relationships. There has to be a gradient of inequality. Otherwise, in whatever form it takes, and there are many, I can hear the cry, but human society strives to be equal. We do notionally, and that's an abstraction, and a very worthwhile one. But in reality, and certainly in sexual and BDSM circles, inequality is a fundamental issue, and this is an element where the players wish to play with it, about which is both internal and external. It is play, and that's the word that's used. And it could be quite real, from a real whipping to a real suspension to a real imprisonment. But it's not to harm, not to damage, but to explore and to reach a certain point and come back. In other words, it's redemptive. It is not meant to be destroying or destructive. During the week, I would also see other subs. By this time in the early 2000s, I'd lost the flats and I closed the escort business, and embarked on a teaching career. I didn't think the two were necessarily compatible, but being out, I never thought that for 1 minute that I should be anything else. I don't require that for other people. I can understand why many subs and slaves would not wish to be. But I would see subs in the week, one or two, sometimes none. But during this period, I moved into another arm of commercial BDSM in the organization of weekend parties. Does sound like something from the 19th century. Anything really but, except that we catered. In 1999, one of my clients turned out to have a farm in North Wales and was already an established BDSM player. And he'd been bankrupted, but rather spectacularly in a rather positive way, and been left with enormous assets, money, not a lot of organizational capacity, but also with quite a lot of contacts and certainly a lot of desire. I teamed up with him and I became the manager of a boot camp in North Wales. And periodically I take my slaves to the boot camp, which was great fun for all who went. But for me, it was actually both interesting and an enormous amount of work, because I was a top master, but also the sort of top manager. But this was about, again, this was playing games with groups of people, not just one, not just two, but anything up to 12. And playing with the gradient of submission and inequality and superiority. This is psychologically exploring group mentality, which is actually quite exciting, and also it's extremely dynamic. When you get more than 3 human beings together in a group, you start to get crowd psychology, and that itself can be both erotic, intimidating, and hugely curious. I found it, from that point of view, rather exhilarating and certainly a learning curve.